Welcome everyone who's joining our safety update webinar for the month of October. I'm Gary Rowe and I'm joined by Andrea Rowe, our General Manager. Morning, Andrea.
Good morning, Gary, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our Friday morning. And if you're in Melbourne, hopefully you're keeping safe inside.
Indeed, yes. Severe weather in Melbourne, as you were telling me, Andrea, coming through. And we're also delayed this month, so we're, I think, a week later than usual for our webinar because we had some unforeseen activities come up for ourselves. So glad that you can make the alternate time. So today we're going to talk, October is Safety Month. So we're going to talk about safety planning. So we'll come to that in a moment. Andrea is going to just mention one technique for looking at incidents and accidents as to how it might draw out some items for you, called the bow tie technique. So Andrea will talk to that. How the courts are now treating roadside work accidents. So Andrea will tell us about that shortly as well. And also, Andrea, you'll tell us shortly about the ban on engineered stone and how WorkSafe are treating it. So let's just kick off, shall we? And we'll come back to that with you in a moment, Andrea. So question of the week, something to think about while we go through this morning's webinar. Are safety committee members and safety representatives liable for the safety advice they may give? So they don't have to, but if they do, will they be held liable for it? So just cogitate on that one for a few moments, and we'll come back at the end of the session and tell you our views on that. But we've got
and Gary, as always, we invite people, if you want to share your opinion on those questions, you can add this into the chat and we'll discuss as well.
Thanks, Andrea. Yes, we will indeed. And I've got a second question for you as well. It's a common one I hear, that if you place a warning sign on a piece of equipment or on part of a workplace, you are more liable because the sign proves you knew about the risk and you didn't fix it. So, Andrea, you would have heard this a number of times as well in your career. So we'll come back to those two questions at the end of this webinar, and we'll share with what we know on these points for you. So let's kick off with the main topic. So October is Safety Month. So we thought probably the most helpful thing we could do is turn our mind to effective safety planning. And so just a couple of points, if I may. And so this is more detailed in our October Safety newsletter, if you want to have a look in greater detail. But I thought this morning I would stick to just the key things that I wanted to point out for you that you might that might help you the most in this area. So a couple of steps, 3 key steps, I think. Firstly, what's our safety vision for our organisation? And increasingly, organisations have things like, oh, we're a zero harm organisation, or whatever other statement that they may want to make. And that might be their view of their vision. As long as we're clear, this is okay, by the way. If somebody said we are a zero harm organisation, I think that's false advertising. And ACCC should take businesses to task, because I don't think we are at zero harm yet. It's okay to say that is our aspiration. So a vision is not where you are now. A vision is where you want to be in the future. So just make it clear in the language that we're not pretending that we are at the end of this journey, but we are somewhere along the journey. But this is our aspiration, that we don't want anyone injured. That's, I think, a reasonable aspiration, for example. So there's our safety vision. So we're clear what we want to achieve. And by the way, many businesses will not go that far to say that we're zero harm or that's our goal. They may feel they don't have the resource. They may feel the law doesn't mean they have to go that far. Whatever reason that they have for not seeking something of that as their safety vision. And now, if you want to work your way through towards that vision, you need what's called a strategic safety plan. Now, what's the difference between a strategic safety plan and now my third point on the slide here, a safety business plan? So I'll work backwards. A safety business plan is not visionary. It's actually locked in stone. It is budgeted for, fully detailed, fully resourced. It's monitored, and somebody, one or more people, are held accountable to deliver it. That's what a proper safety business plan is. Too many organisations at the end of the year, when they talk to the relevant executive in charge that is responsible for safety, says, how do we go this year with our safety business plan? Oh, well, we didn't implement all of it because, I got sick back in September, and of course we had that other issue in the organisation, the delayed rollout of that training. That's not acceptable. If you think of all of the other business plans in your organisation, the head of production is not allowed to just glibly say, oh, I was sick in September and that's why we didn't deliver on budget this year. Not acceptable to the board, not acceptable to the executive team. And so I think we as safety professionals should be more professional about how we develop a safety business plan, that we are genuinely committed and will deliver 100% of that plan. So now you know what a safety business plan is. So now I'll jump back up to step 2, a strategic plan. A strategic safety plan is probably looking 5 to 10 years out, probably similar to our safety vision. So we're looking maybe 10 years, a decade out where we want to be. And you actually ask yourself, what do we want to look like as an organisation, particularly around safety? How should people be behaving? How should the physical work environment look? How should our safety systems, what would they look like? Would they be big and cumbersome that nobody reads and are boring? Or will they be really short, sharp, succinct checklists that people actually use? I think that would be a wonderful aspiration. It may be in the vision, but certainly would be in our strategic plan. And I think the other part of that, Andrea, is when you look at strategies, I think it helps to think of what are our lead strategies. And then there's a thing called enabling strategies. And people say, well, gee, what are they? I can tell you that if you've got an overall strategic plan and direction where you want to be, there might be 4 or 5 lead strategies that are going to get you to that goal, that whatever you've stated. But for that to occur, some other changes will have to happen within the business or outside the business or with your stakeholders, customers, suppliers, etc. So they're called enabling strategies, other things that you'll need to work on that will make sure your lead strategies deliver the overall goal for whatever you've set. So that, if you like, is in a nutshell, Andrea. I hope it's not too fast or confusing about effective safety planning. And as you know, Andrea, you can break it down now to detail. What do we do? So probably on that point.
And Gary, I wanted to just help people that struggle between, the difference between, you've clearly explained the business plan is what we've actually set out to do and we actually will do and achieve this year. Whereas the vision, I share, we talk about vision 0. And I do remind you, that's the only really only ethical position that we could have is, for example, 0 fatalities on the road. Because I heard about years ago, a mining company saying that they budget, in the budget, they budgeted for 2 fatalities per year. So you certainly couldn't have that as your vision, the 2 fatalities is not, it's not an ethical vision. So the only ethical vision is 0. So we have to have that as our vision, but we have to break it down and say, well, realistically, what can we do this year to work towards that vision of ultimately having, 0 serious injuries or fatalities?
Yeah, it's a very good point, Andrew. I read an article, I think it was only a few short years ago, about Volvo, the car manufacturer's plans for car safety. Their ultimate vision was no one was harmed buy a Volvo vehicle. But they had to be realistic, and so they said, but we will start with Volvo occupants. And so you have a plan leading out how they can progressively make the Volvo cars physically safer, as in crash protection, but all of the electronics that we now know with automation and detection and so forth, to make it safe for the occupants of their vehicles. And they know further out that it might be 10, 20 years out, to make it safe for every other road user, including pedestrians, how they won't be harmed by a Volvo vehicle. So you've hit it exactly, Andrew. And I think morally we have to say that's our goal, but we know that's not realistic in the short term. We are going to have some accidents or incidents, and how we're going to manage them. And so that's what the safety business plan will include, Andrew, so you're correct. So just on screen, to help out if people are interested, we have an interesting half-day workshop planned for the 10th of December. So this is a great time coming into the end of the year, so you can start getting your 2025 plans together correctly. We're going to deal with both in the same half-day workshop, the structure and how to put together a really nice and clean safety strategic plan, certainly at a high level. We won't know your organisation and details, but also how to quickly structure an effective safety business plan, which is the real plan that's going to be delivered over the next 12 months. A strategic plan is going to be delivered over 5 to 10 years, and so it has a much longer time frame. And just to finish off on that, if you then breaking down your safety business plan, some organisations say they have a monthly calendar just to help people to know, and you'll see their monthly workplace inspections happen every month. So that's a strong bar there. And they say office safety, we're going to review every September. It'll be our focus that month. And let's have a look. Manual handling will be the March. So whatever part of the business you go to, you could say, what have you done this month to help improve manual handling, to minimise manual handling risk, ergonomic understanding and assessments. Others will say first aid is February of every year, and so on. So a nice little calendar to rotate around the focus and activity, but it means every part of the business is doing this at the same time, so managers can ask, what have you done about this month on this topic, and keep it alive. So just some thoughts there, Amber, on business planning.
Thank you. And I love the calendar there. That makes it really easy and visual for everybody to actually see. And when I use those calendars, I often turn it green. So that month when I've done the activity, I change it to green so that it's visual that that's being done. Yes. And then you can highlight, in yellow or red, something that you didn't do to remind you that you need to get onto that.
That's a nice idea. I've not been doing that myself, so I like that, Andrea. So thanks again. So just tell us a little bit about the bow tie accident investigation model.
Yeah, so this is, one of many risk analysis techniques that you can use. And it's really helpful for a business to look at, like we say, we're striving towards, the Vision Zero to eliminate accidents or injuries, especially, to our workers or to others, and or to, even property damage. So this is one way you can look at those. So, for example, if you looked at an event being like a fire, for example, you can look at in your business what are all the potential causes for a fire at your site or in your operation. And, you can see in the left-hand side of the bow tie, you can have things in place that will actually stop that fire in its tracks. Yeah. Separating, removing ignition sources, removing combustible material from flammables, all of those things. But what we can see is in the bow tie that if they fail, you can have your fire. And then on the right-hand side, you can look at the consequences. But again, for example, if you have a fire, you can have various things can actually stop the fire from spreading. So as you can see, the consequences can grow. So if you don't have your mitigations in place, such as your fire sprinklers functioning, extinguishing the fire, evacuation plans enacted, all of those things, you can have consequences. So it gives you a really good way of looking, how do we prevent the adverse event, and then how can we reduce the consequences of an adverse event happening.
If I may, Andrea, I like that. So, for example, in my mind, when you were talking, it struck me that fire extinguishers and fire sprinkler systems don't prevent fires. They're on the right-hand side in the red, which will help stop the damage and minimise that damage if it were to start. But the absence of the sprinklers or absence of the extinguishers would be one of our issues that the bow tie might highlight.
Absolutely, and you can apply this to all different areas of safety type events. So even a psychological injury, obviously you could have all the threats to your workers' well-being, causes of stress, and then you have your early intervention programs and support that you can provide your workers to actually reduce the severity and the consequences there. So I would encourage you to have a think about those. And just, and look at whether you think your prevention and recovery controls there are strong and what you can do to improve them.
Well done, Andrea. Corinne, thank you for, Corinne said that's the best description of the bow tie she's heard of. So well done, Andrea. So,
thanks, Corinne. That's lovely.
There we go. So thanks for that, Andrea. And this unfortunate roadside accident, but how the courts are treating it. Can you tell us a bit about this?
Yes, this one did surprise me a little bit at first when I first read this incident, because what happened is, the truck was broken down or damaged, and they moved the truck into, I believe it was a side street, Gary, so off a main, it was off a main road. And a drug-affected driver drove onto the wrong side of the road and hit and killed. Was it 2 workers killed or just one worker killed?
Actually, Andrea, you're mixing another one that we dealt with. So this is the second roadside accident case with the fatalities that you and I have been dealing with.
Right, Gary, I'll let you know what happened.
Yeah, so I'm not trying to make light, so apologies for the laughing, but yeah, just a mix-up. This one, Andrea, I'll just help you. It was struck by another truck, and you would think, well, okay. What they were doing was swapping truck drivers, swap the trailers, so they may come up from Melbourne halfway to Sydney, swap trailers, but use their own truck to drive back with another trailer. Does that make sense? They were doing this in a service station, large truck car park, but the servo shut down and they weren't able to access this site. So they started swapping truck trailers on the roadside. And this is a 100-kilometre-hour speed limit zone. So this was a second case, Andrea.
Yeah.
And so but in both cases, and one of the drivers was struck and killed, unfortunately. And what it showed in the investigation, the space was so limited on the side of the road, the drivers had to stand on the road or partly onto the road to complete the task. And one of them was struck and killed doing this. What we've seen in the case that you mentioned, Andrea, that the courts are treating it the same. The courts are now saying it is negligent. If you run a business and you've got workers, whether in a car, a truck or a van, and they're out on the roadside, if you don't have a policy and a procedure on what your team should do if they have a flat tyre or breakdown, the courts are saying roadside work is negligent unless you have adequate controls. And you and I know in the past people would change tyres on the roadside, have bonnets up and doors open, really close to passing traffic is what you've mentioned, Andrea, with the other case where tragically 2 mechanics were killed. So we've got in close succession now 2 court cases, and the courts are making it crystal clear roadside work is negligent unless you have adequate controls. And generally, unless you've the good traffic control is when you've planned work. So when people work on the roads, they have all of the traffic signs out beforehand. But when vehicles break down, they haven't got all those traffic people out there. So generally speaking, we should try and get clear off the road, and probably look to have professionals come and tow or replace. So you and I discussed 2 of those cases. So this is now the second case in
And
close
if anyone's
succession.
had a flat tire on the freeway recently, I did last year, and when you call the RACV, they actually send a tow truck at first to tow you off the freeway.
Yes.
And then in a back street or they come to your home, they then send the mechanic to come and swap over the tire, rather that they won't do that on the freeways anymore.
Yeah.
They used to just come and change the tire at the side of the road, whether it was on the freeway or not.
Yeah, that's correct. So this is an important point, I think, for everyone, for your own safety, for your family and friends, but particularly we have legal responsibilities for workers. So we need to think about that in the business context. So thanks for that, Andrea.
And I think, Gary, it's important for businesses to remember, we did share earlier in the year, we talked about, the top fatality causes in Australia. And for most of our businesses, including us as consultants, our number one fatality risk is actually driving on the road. Something like a flat tire, it's important for the company to have agreed procedures, even, such as, we use RACV membership so that, none of our team are expected to be changing the tires roadside. So having that, being able to call for somebody to do that in a safe location is important for all of us.
Absolutely, Andrea. So thank you for that. And engineered stone, sounds like this has been treated very seriously by WorkSafe these days.
Well, Gary, it is. And, as we know, Victoria didn't have any transition period, but they've had to continue to remind that it is banned. They have been doing inspections, and I'm told that there had been some non-compliances found. WorkSafe Victoria has reminded businesses that they are doing inspections and that working with the engineered stone is fully banned, and it can't take place. So you need to look at alternative stone, alternative materials for bench tops.
Indeed, but we have a lot of engineered stone now existing in homes and businesses, particularly like kitchen bench tops, bathroom bench tops, etc. So it's banned to introduce more into Australia or into the workplace, but they've got to follow the codes, don't they? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, correct. So there are some provisions for legacy stone. So work with legacy stone, so existing bench tops, if you want to remove them or modify them, there are much stricter controls that you need to apply now, such as no dry cutting, and there's a lot more controls that you need to have in place when working on that.
Okay, so our listeners need to be aware of that, and even if it's in the home, make sure that they engage contractors that they're aware of and following the strict controls that have to follow for working with that engineered silica stone these days. Thanks, Andrea. And if you like, Andrea, I'll mention this, although you're in the photo there, I see. Our next Safety Leadership Foundation course is coming up on the 4th and 5th of December, which will be held here at our Clayton facility here, conference centre. So if people are interested and want to know how to change behaviours, how we should be leading safety in the organisation, and if you've got 1 or 2 key people that really would value this skill and benefit from it, they're the people you should be thinking about. We should get those people there, or it may be yourselves. Even if you're highly experienced in safety, our experience is even experienced safety professionals say, that was great, I picked up a lot of good points in our session. We've packed a lot into it, Andrea, you and I know, developing this over probably close to 20 years to refine it to where it is, and we know people get good value from it. So consider that either for your own career development, professional development, or for key people in your team. So let's come to the question of the week. The first question was, are safety committee members and safety representatives liable for the advice they may give? And I don't know if you've seen any chat. I don't think anyone's offered any answers, Nigel. I apologise if anyone out there has. I just don't see it on the ticker tape feed there.
No, I didn't see any comments in the chat.
Yeah. So what I can tell you is, if you look at the Victorian Safety Act and also the WHS Act for virtually every other jurisdiction in Australia, the WHS Act has specifically legal immunity for health and safety representatives, and therefore that would carry over to safety committee members for the work and the advice they give, as long as it is given in good faith. If it is known to be wrong, if it is known to be harmful, that's not good faith. So as long as you believe that to be true, this is the advice I gave, and it turned out to be wrong, you will not be prosecuted by WorkSafe, and the business won't have grounds to take action against you. In Victoria, that same protection's achieved in a different way. What it is that under the Act, there are no duties imposed on health and safety committee members or health and safety reps. So by not having a duty, you can't be in breach of the Act. So once again, as long as you've acted in good faith, there'll be no civil liability either. You've simply acted in good faith. This is what I believe was the case. I told people that at the committee meeting, or I told managers we should do this, or that's a hazard. You can do that quite freely as long as that's a reasonable belief. But just consider, do I know everything? And if you don't, come and do our 2-day safety leadership course, and we'll tell you how to answer those questions, or ask other specialists in your business that might know a technical answer. But as long as that you have reasonable belief, whether in Victoria or elsewhere, you have legal protection. Have I answered that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to remind Gary, I think hopefully you agree, I think this means two important things. The first one is, if you are a health and safety committee member or a health and safety representative, this means that you shouldn't be afraid to participate, to put your hand up and volunteer and represent your fellow workers, for fear of, making a mistake or doing something wrong. You can actually do this, and you do have a level of protection there. You can participate in inspections, and feel safe that you're not, a lot of people worry about the legal consequences, that you can feel safe to do that. But it also means, as an employer, you still need to make sure that all the activities, so for example, if your safety committee tells you that they're doing workplace inspections, ultimately management still have responsibility for that.
Yeah, they do, and make sure they're done right. That's a very good point, Andrew. I like the way you expressed that. This is October Safety Month. It's good to have encouragement that people can freely participate in committees and giving advice. So thanks for that, Andrea. And our second question, almost everyone will have heard this. You put a warning sign out there, a danger sign, caution, you're only more liable, because now the sign actually proves you knew about this risk, but you didn't fix it. So guess what? The answer is yes and no. And the answer is yes, you are correct. If somebody merely knew a risk and was lazy and a sign was deficient, it was not adequate. For example, you cannot put a warning sign on a machine that needs to be guarded and assume that the sign will replace the adequacy of the guard. The safety regulations require that machinery be adequately guarded. So if it's not adequately guarded, the sign will not serve that purpose. So you'd be correct, the sign has not helped. However, here's the point. Try and think of it for temporary interim situations. A warning sign is eminently sensible. Somebody has a spillage on the floor, to quickly put out warning signs, slippery floor, or in hospitals, shopping centres, supermarkets, which operate typically 24/7, they don't shut down for cleaning. So they have to mop the floors when people are there, including the public. So they sensibly put out a warning sign to say, caution, slippery floor, because they've just mopped it. And you and I, if we approach what we know to be a slippery floor, we alter our gait and we walk with smaller steps and with greater caution. And generally we can negotiate the wet floor safely. But without that warning, we would have just approached it at our normal walking pace and gait. And you and I would be both annoyed and furious if us or any of our family or friends fell over and were injured. We could break a hip or some other injury. That somebody didn't bother to tell us and didn't warn us. Similarly on the roads, councils have an obligation when they become aware of a tree fallen down over the road, a major subsidence on the road or road edge, they have a legal obligation to quickly put out warning signage. So drivers, because they can't fix it immediately, but they are going to fix it as quickly as they can. So signage is largely for interim, is absolutely appropriate. And then exercise caution where else you put signs. For example, if something's a hot surface and we're not going to physically guard it, or it's not appropriate or that big a risk, caution, hot surface, eminently sensible, just to let somebody know if they didn't know about that. Are you happy with my explanation there, Andrea?
Yeah, I am, Gary. And I also wanted to remind that, remember, when the courts consider what you should have done, to control a safety hazard, they consider not just what you knew, but what you ought to have known.
Yeah.
So if, so by not putting up a sign and pretending that you didn't know something's dangerous is actually not a protection anyway.
Yeah, absolutely, Andrea. So thank you for that. So that brings us to the end. Thank you, everyone, for joining us once again for our monthly safety update. We hope there was a couple of things of interest and of value to you in our webinar today. So thanks once again, Andrea. Our next webinar will be back to our usual rhythm of the second Friday of each month. So the next webinar will be on the 8th of November. We hope to see you then. Thanks again, Andrea. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, Gary. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a great weekend.
Okay. Thank you.